My brother secretly gave my ex a seat at my graduation dinner, hoping we'd finally talk. But she stood up in front of everyone, read my private messages out loud, and left me sitting there in shock. Now my dad is telling me I owe my brother thanks for trying to help. I spent 4 years earning a degree. My brother spent 4 minutes destroying the dinner that was supposed to celebrate it by giving my ex a chair, a stage, and my private messages. My name is Cole Bennett. I'm 26 years old. I just graduated with a degree in civil engineering from a state university that accepted me on my third application. Not my first, not my second, third. The first time, my GPA wasn't high enough. The second time, I got waitlisted and then rejected 2 weeks before the semester started. The third time, I wrote an application essay at 4 a.m. on my kitchen floor with a cold cup of coffee and a sentence that said, "I have failed at this twice. I am asking for a third chance because I don't know how to want anything less." They let me in. I don't know if it was the essay or the desperation, but they let me in, and I made sure, every single day for 4 years, that they never regretted it. Those 4 years weren't glamorous. I worked nights at a shipping warehouse to pay tuition. I ate ramen 4 days a week, not because I was a cliché, but because it was 30 cents a packet and I had $11 in my account most Tuesdays. I slept in the library more times than I slept in my own bed junior year. There were nights I sat in the parking lot of that warehouse at 2 a.m. after a 10-hour shift and thought about quitting. Thought about how easy it would be to just stop, to go home, to tell everyone it didn't work out and slide back into the comfortable mediocrity my family seemed so content with. But every time I got close to that edge, something pulled me back. A stubbornness I can't explain. A voice somewhere in the back of my skull that said, "If you quit now, you prove everyone right." So I didn't quit. I kept going, semester after semester, exam after exam, until I wasn't the kid who got rejected twice anymore. I was the kid who graduated with a 3.7 GPA, made the dean's list the last 3 semesters, and signed a job offer 2 weeks before the ceremony. I walked across that stage on a Saturday morning in May, shook the dean's hand, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. The specific kind of pride that comes from building something no one can take from you. Or so I thought. The dinner was that evening. My mother, Lynette, organized it. She'd been planning it for weeks, calling the restaurant, choosing the menu, sending out invitations with little mortarboard emojis that made me laugh every time I saw them. She booked a private room at a restaurant downtown, the kind with cloth napkins and candles on every table, and a waiter who introduces himself by first name. 14 people were supposed to be there. Family, close friends, the people who had watched me fail and try again and fail again and finally get it right. It was supposed to be my night. The one night where everything I'd built was acknowledged, celebrated, seen. My father, Darren, was there. My older sister, Avery, with her husband Caleb Foster. My brother, Blake, with his girlfriend Sienna Brooks. My best friend and roommate, Mason Ryder. A few cousins. My mother at the head of the table, glowing like she'd graduated herself. The room smelled like garlic bread and candle wax, and something that felt dangerously close to happiness. And then there was one extra chair. One I didn't know about. One that was occupied by the time I arrived. Tessa Monroe, my ex-girlfriend. The woman I had spent 2 years with and 8 months recovering from. The woman who had taken pieces of me I was still trying to get back. The woman who, as of that evening, I had not spoken to, texted, or seen in almost a year. She was sitting between Blake and Sienna. She was wearing a black dress. She was smiling. She had a glass of wine in her hand like she'd been there for 20 minutes already, like she belonged, like this was normal. I need to tell you about Tessa before this goes any further. We dated for 2 years. The first year was good, the kind of good that makes you reckless because you think it'll last forever. The second year was a slow-motion collapse. Tessa had a way of making everything about control. She'd go through my phone. She'd show up at my study groups unannounced. She'd pick fights before exams because, looking back, I think she didn't want me to succeed at something she hadn't given me permission to pursue. When I finally ended it, she told me I'd regret it. She told me no one else would put up with me. She told me I was nothing without her. And for a while, in the dark months that followed, I believed her. I stopped in the doorway of the private room. My stomach dropped so fast I felt it in my knees. Mason, who was walking in behind me, bumped into my shoulder and said, "Bro, why'd you?" And then he saw her too. He didn't finish the sentence. He just exhaled. A long, slow exhale. The kind you make when you realize something terrible is about to happen and you can't stop it. I looked at Blake. He was grinning. That specific grin he does when he thinks he's pulled off something clever. Chin tilted up, eyebrows raised, waiting for you to react so he can judge whether it landed. Surprise, he said. Thought it was time you two finally talked. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My brain was doing that thing where it runs 10 scenarios at once and none of them end well. I looked at my mother. She looked uncomfortable but not surprised, which meant she'd known, or at least suspected, and hadn't warned me. I looked at my father. Darren was cutting bread. He didn't even look up. That's Darren Bennett in a nutshell. The man exists in a permanent state of deliberate oblivion. He sees everything and acknowledges nothing. He's been doing it my entire life, watching Blake take things too far and then pretending the ceiling is suddenly the most fascinating thing in the room. I sat down. I don't know why. Maybe because 14 people were watching me and the part of my brain that manages public behavior overrode the part that wanted to leave. Maybe because I'd spent 4 years learning how to push through situations that felt impossible. Maybe because I still, even then, didn't want to make a scene at my own dinner. I sat down and I pretended it was fine. For about 40 minutes, it almost was. Conversations happened. Food was ordered. Lynette made a toast. She cried. She said she was proud of me. She said she remembered driving me to campus on my first day and watching me walk through those gates with a backpack that was bigger than my confidence. The whole table laughed. Avery squeezed my hand under the table. Mason kept one eye on Tessa the entire time, like a security camera that doesn't blink. Tessa was quiet mostly. Polite. She said congratulations when I sat down. I said thank you. That was the extent of our exchange. I started to think maybe I could get through this. Maybe Blake's stupid ambush would just be an awkward footnote to an otherwise good night. Maybe Tessa would finish her wine and leave, and I'd never have to explain to anyone why my hands were shaking under the table. And then, somewhere between the main course and dessert, Tessa stood up. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. She just rose from her chair. Slowly. Like she'd been building up to it. She had her phone in her hand. The screen was lit. She was holding it the way people hold a microphone when they're about to give a speech they've rehearsed. The table went quiet. Not because anyone understood what was happening, but because there's something about a person standing at a seated table that automatically commands attention. Some primal, social instinct that says, this person has something to say. I wasn't going to do this, Tessa said. Her voice was calm, steady, almost rehearsed. But since I'm here, and since everyone in Cole's life is at this table, I think you all deserve to know who you're really celebrating tonight. My blood went cold. Not warm. Cold. The kind of cold that starts in your fingertips and moves inward, like your body is shutting down from the edges. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to say something. But my legs wouldn't work and my mouth wouldn't open, and I was trapped in that chair like someone had bolted me to it. She unlocked her phone. She scrolled. And then she started reading. January 14th, 2:47 a.m., she said. Cole wrote, I don't know how to exist without you. I feel like I'm drowning and nobody notices. The table was silent. 14 people. Not a breath. She scrolled again. February 2nd, 11 p.m. I drove past your apartment tonight. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes. I know that makes me pathetic. I don't care anymore. My mother put her hand over her mouth. Avery's eyes were wide. Caleb had his arm around Avery like he was bracing her. Mason was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. Darren was still looking at his plate, still cutting bread, like a man determined to finish his meal while his son's dignity was being dismantled 6 feet away. Tessa kept going. Message after message. The worst ones. The 2 a.m. ones. The ones I sent when I was at my lowest, when the breakup was fresh and the grief was so thick I couldn't see through it. The messages I sent when I was 24 years old and heartbroken and didn't know yet that pain is temporary, but screenshots are forever. She read 6 messages total, each one more vulnerable than the last. Each one delivered in her calm, measured voice to a room full of people I loved, people I respected, people whose opinion of me mattered more than I'd ever admit out loud. She paused between each one. Let the silence do its work. Let the words settle on the table like something spilled that couldn't be wiped up. When she finished, she put her phone down. She looked at me. I just thought they should know, she said, that the person they're celebrating tonight spent months begging me to come back. She picked up her purse. She walked out. The door to the private room closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot. Nobody moved. I sat there. I don't know for how long. 5 seconds. 10. 30. Tom had stopped working. My face was hot. My ears were ringing. I could feel every set of eyes in that room on me, and each one felt like a weight being placed on my chest, one by one, until I couldn't breathe. The candles on the table were still flickering. The garlic bread was still warm. The waiter was standing in the corner holding a dessert menu, frozen, unsure whether to approach or disappear. Everything in that room was exactly where it had been 5 minutes ago, and nothing was the same. Blake broke the silence. Of course he did. I didn't know she was going to do that, he said. He said it quickly, defensively. The grin was gone. I just thought you guys could talk. I was trying to help. I looked at him. My brother, 2 years older than me. The one who had dropped out of college after 3 semesters because he said the system was rigged against creative thinkers. The one who had bounced between 5 jobs in 4 years. Bartender, personal trainer, crypto day trader, real estate assistant, and now freelance consultant, which as far as I could tell meant he made PowerPoints for people who found him on Instagram. The one who had watched me spend 4 years grinding towards something real and who couldn't sit in the glow of my achievement for one evening without finding a way to redirect the light. Because that's what this was. I saw it clearly now, the way you see something you've been squinting at for years when someone finally turns on the overhead light. Blake didn't invite Tessa because he wanted to help me. Blake invited Tessa because he wanted to disrupt me. My graduation, the degree, the job offer, the dinner, the toast, my mother's tears of pride. All of it was a mirror that showed Blake everything he wasn't. And Blake couldn't stand in front of that mirror for 3 hours without smashing it. He didn't plan the messages. He probably didn't know Tessa would read them. But he knew what bringing her would do. He knew it would shift the energy. He knew it would take my night, and make it about something else. About him being the peacemaker. About him being the one who cared enough to try. About anything other than his younger brother succeeding at something he couldn't finish. I didn't say any of this. Not then. I just looked at him until he looked away. Darren spoke next. My father. The man who had been cutting bread while my ex-girlfriend walked into my graduation dinner. The man who hadn't looked up. The man who, when the room was still vibrating with the echo of my most private words being read aloud, said this. Cole, I think you owe your brother some thanks. He was trying to help you two reconnect. That takes guts. 14 people heard him say it. The same 14 people who had just heard my most vulnerable moments broadcasted like a public service announcement. And my father, thought the appropriate response was to congratulate the person who made it possible. I looked at Lynette. She was crying again. But these weren't the proud tears from earlier. These were the helpless kind. The kind that come when you love everyone at a table and can't fix what's breaking between them. I stood up. Slowly. Carefully. The way you stand when you're trying not to break something. And the something might be yourself. Thank you for dinner, Mom, I said. My voice was even. Controlled. I didn't trust it to stay that way, so I kept it short. I looked at Mason. He was already standing. He'd been waiting for my signal. That's the thing about Mason. He doesn't need instructions. He reads the room like a first language. We'd lived together for 3 years. He'd seen me through the Tessa aftermath, through the late nights, through the warehouse shifts, through the moments when I wasn't sure I'd make it. He knew what I needed before I did. We walked out. The hallway was empty. The restaurant noise hit us. Music, laughter, clinking glasses. Normal sounds. Happy sounds. Sounds from a world where people's private grief didn't get read aloud at dinner tables. Mason didn't say anything for a while. We stood outside in the parking lot, leaning against his car. The air was warm. May evening. The kind of night that's supposed to feel like a beginning. You good? He said. No, I said. Yeah, he said. Didn't think so. Then he told me something that made my stomach flip. I recorded it, he said. The whole thing. From the moment she stood up. I looked at him. Why? Because I know your family, Cole. By next week, Blake's going to say it wasn't that bad. Your dad's going to say you overreacted. Your mom's going to say she doesn't remember it happening that way. And I wanted you to have proof that it happened exactly the way you remember it. He showed me his phone. The video was there. 7 minutes and 43 seconds. Tessa standing. Tessa reading. Blake's face. Darren's bread. My mother's hand over her mouth. Avery's frozen expression. And me. Sitting there. Taking it. I didn't watch the whole thing. Not that night. I told Mason to keep it. I wasn't ready. We drove home. I went to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed in the suit I'd worn to my graduation ceremony that morning. The same suit that had felt like armor 12 hours ago and now felt like a costume. I loosened the tie. I stared at the wall. On my desk was the graduation program with my name printed in it. Cole Bennett, Bachelor of Science, Civil Engineering. Cum laude. It was right there in black ink. Proof that I'd done something. And yet all I could hear, echoing in loops inside my head, was my own voice. The 2 a.m. version, the desperate version, being read by someone who'd turned my pain into a performance. I sat there until 3 a.m. and I didn't sleep. The text started the next morning. Blake, bro, I'm sorry it went sideways, but I really was trying to help. She told me she just wanted to talk. Darren. Cole, call your brother. He feels terrible. You need to be the bigger person here. Lynette. Sweetheart, can we talk? I didn't know she would do that. I'm so sorry. Avery. I'm coming over. Don't argue. Avery showed up at noon. She brought coffee and sat on my couch and didn't say anything for 10 minutes. She just sat there. Present. Solid. The way Avery has always been. Quiet in the way that strong people are quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled because it's already saying everything. Then she said, Blake did something like this to me. Before my wedding. Did you know that? I didn't. She told me. 3 months before she married Caleb, Blake had invited her ex-boyfriend to a family barbecue. Same reasoning. Thought they should talk. Same result. Chaos, tears, a ruined day. Caleb almost called off the engagement. Avery spent a week convincing him that her family wasn't insane. Darren had said the same thing then too. He was trying to help. That takes guts. The same sentence. Word for word. Like it was scripted. Like Darren had one line programmed for every time Blake detonated someone else's happiness and needed a defense attorney. It's a pattern, Avery said. Blake can't stand being in a room where someone else is the center of attention. So he creates a crisis. And then he becomes the person everyone talks about, either as the hero who tried to help or the victim who didn't mean any harm. Either way, the spotlight moves. She was right. I could see it now. Every major moment in my life, every achievement, every milestone, Blake had found a way to insert himself. When I got my first job, Blake announced he was starting a business the same week. When I moved into my own apartment, Blake told my parents he was thinking about moving to another state. And suddenly, every conversation was about Blake's plans. When I got into the engineering program on my 3rd try, Blake said he was also considering going back to school, and Darren spent the entire dinner asking Blake about his options. He wasn't trying to help. He was trying to matter. And this time, he'd used Tessa to do it. But here's the thing that Tessa didn't know, and that nobody at that table knew, because Tessa only read the messages that made me look desperate. She didn't read the ones that came before. She didn't read the messages where she told me I'd never amount to anything. She didn't read the one where she said, "You're going to end up exactly like your brother, a dropout with a big mouth and nothing to show for it." She didn't read the message where she threatened to show up at my campus and tell everyone who you really are if I didn't take her back. She didn't read the one where she called my mother and told her I'd been emotionally abusive, which wasn't true, but which Lynette believed for 3 months until Avery sat her down and walked her through the actual timeline. She didn't read the messages where she told me she'd make sure I failed my finals if I didn't respond to her. She didn't read the night she sent 14 consecutive texts between midnight and 3 a.m., each one more threatening than the last, until I had to mute my phone and sit in the bathroom with the lights off just to stop shaking. Tessa read 6 messages. 6. Out of hundreds. She selected the 6 that painted me as pathetic and desperate and skipped the dozens that showed her as manipulative, threatening, and cruel. She curated a narrative. She performed it. And the room bought it because the room only had one side of the story. 2 days later, I texted Mason. "Send me the video." He sent it. I watched it this time. All 7 minutes and 43 seconds. I watched Tessa's face. Calm. Rehearsed. She had practiced this. I watched Blake's face. The grin disappearing. The realization, slow, stupid, and too late, that this had gone further than he intended. I watched Darren's face. Nothing. Bread. I watched my own face. And that was the hardest part. Because I looked small. Not physically. Emotionally. I looked like a man who had been caught being human and didn't know how to defend himself against it. I saved the video. I didn't post it. I didn't share it. I didn't send it to Tessa with a note. I just kept it. Because Mason was right. I would need it. Not as ammunition. As armor. Proof that my memory was accurate. Proof that I wasn't exaggerating. Proof that when my family inevitably rewrote the story to make themselves comfortable, I had a recording that wouldn't let them. The days after Avery's visit were strange. Quiet in a way I wasn't used to. My phone, which had been buzzing nonstop since the dinner, went mostly silent. The initial wave of texts had receded, and what replaced it was something almost worse, a thick, heavy nothing. No one checking in. No one asking how I was doing. Just Blake's defensive excuses, Darren's demands that I apologize for being hurt, and then silence. The kind of silence that tells you exactly where you stand without anyone having to say it. I went to work. I came home. I cooked dinner for one. I sat at my desk and stared at the diploma on the wall and tried to feel the pride I'd felt on that stage. Some nights I could. Some nights it felt like trying to hold water in my hands. I could feel it there, but it kept slipping through. Mason kept things normal. That was his superpower. He didn't walk on eggshells around me. He didn't bring up the dinner every 5 minutes. He just existed in our shared apartment the way he always had, leaving his shoes in the hallway, playing music too loud in the shower, burning toast every single morning like it was a religious practice. One night he knocked on my door and said, "We're going to a driving range. You're terrible at golf, and I want to laugh at something." I went. I was terrible. He laughed. And for 2 hours, I didn't think about Tessa or Blake or Darren or any of it. Mason never said, "I'm here for you." He just was. And that meant more than every hollow text my family had sent combined. I started my new job 3 weeks after the dinner. First day, new suit. Not the graduation one. I couldn't look at that one yet. Fresh haircut. Coffee in hand. I walked into a glass-walled office building that smelled like new carpet and ambition. My supervisor shook my hand and said, "Welcome aboard, Cole. We're glad you're here." 4 words. Simple. Professional. And they hit me harder than anything anyone in my family had said in months. Because they were earned. Not obligated. Not conditional. Just a straightforward acknowledgement that I belonged somewhere because of what I'd built, not who I was related to. The job was good. Hard, but good. I spent my first month learning software systems, reviewing blueprints, sitting in meetings where people used words like load-bearing capacity and seismic tolerance like they were poetry. I loved it. For the first time since the dinner, I felt like myself again, not the version of myself that Tessa had projected onto a screen for 14 people, but the real version. The one who worked nights and studied mornings and got rejected twice and came back a 3rd time. The one who designs things that hold. Sienna reached out to me during this period. She called one evening, sounding nervous, like she wasn't sure she had the right to be calling. She told me things I hadn't known. She said Blake had been spiraling since my graduation, not with guilt, but with resentment. He'd been telling anyone who would listen that I was overreacting and that I'd always been the sensitive one. She said he'd been drinking more. She said he'd started picking fights with her about small things, the dishes, the laundry, the way she loaded the dishwasher. She said, "He's not angry at you, Cole. He's angry at himself. But he'll never admit that, so he aims it outward." I told her I was sorry. Not for Blake. For her. Because Sienna was collateral damage in a war she didn't start, and she deserved someone who listened when she said, "Don't do this." She thanked me. Her voice cracked when she did. A week later, Darren called me. "Cole, this has gone on long enough. Blake made a mistake, but his heart was in the right place. You need to call him and work this out. Family doesn't hold grudges. Family doesn't ambush you at your own dinner, Dad." He didn't know she'd do that. He knew what bringing her would do. He just didn't care. Silence. Then, "You're being dramatic. Just like you were with Tessa." I hung up. First time in my life I hung up on my father. My hands were shaking when I did it, but not from fear. From clarity. From the sudden, blinding understanding that the man who was supposed to protect me had spent my entire life protecting my brother instead. I didn't call Blake. I didn't text him back. I didn't respond to Darren's follow-up messages, which escalated from "call your brother" to "you're tearing this family apart" to "I didn't raise you to be this petty." Each message was a variation of the same theme. Cole, absorb the damage. Cole, be the bigger person. Cole, make this easier for everyone except yourself. I did respond to Lynette. She deserved that. She sent me a long message, genuine, not performative, saying she was sorry, saying she should have spoken up, saying she didn't know how to fix it, but she wanted to try. I told her I loved her. I told her I needed time. She said she understood. And unlike Darren, she actually gave me the time instead of demanding I shrink myself to fit back into a family that had never made room for me in the first place. Avery became my anchor. She and Caleb had me over for dinner twice that week. We didn't talk about Blake every time. Sometimes we just ate and watched terrible TV and existed in the same room without anyone trying to make it about something it wasn't. It was exactly what I needed. The quiet kind of love. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that just shows up with takeout and sits next to you and doesn't ask you to perform being okay. Caleb, who normally keeps to himself, pulled me aside one night and said, "For what it's worth, I wanted to flip that table." Avery had to grab my arm. It made me laugh. First real laugh in weeks. Mason, true to form, handled things his own way. He ran into Blake at a bar 3 weeks after the dinner. Blake tried to shake his hand. Mason looked at him and said, "I have the whole thing on video, Blake. Every second. So the next time you tell someone you were just trying to help, remember that there's a recording that shows exactly what you were doing. And it doesn't look like helping." Blake didn't say a word. Mason finished his drink and left. He told me about it the next morning over coffee, casually, like he was describing the weather. That's Mason. He doesn't make speeches about loyalty. He just shows up and does the thing. A month passed. Then 2. The calls from Darren slowed. Blake sent me one more text. "I miss my brother," which would have meant something if it had come with an actual apology instead of a sentence designed to make me feel guilty for having boundaries. Sienna, Blake's girlfriend, reached out once. She said, "For what it's worth, I told him not to do it. He didn't listen. He never listens." I thanked her. I meant it. Sienna had always been the quiet conscience in Blake's orbit, the one who saw his worst impulses forming and tried to redirect them before they landed. She deserved better than being ignored. 3 months after the dinner, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. It was Tessa's roommate, a woman named Jordan who I'd met twice when Tessa and I were still together. She said Tessa had been drinking and talking about the dinner again, bragging about it to friends like it was a performance she was proud of. Jordan said she couldn't stay quiet anymore. She said, "You should know something." Tessa planned that speech for 2 weeks. She rehearsed it in front of a mirror. She picked those 6 messages specifically because they made you look the worst. She told me she wanted to ruin his little celebration. Those were her exact words. I thanked Jordan. I didn't ask why she was telling me. Some people just reach a point where staying silent feels worse than speaking up. I understood that better than most. That call confirmed what I'd already suspected but hadn't been able to prove. Tessa hadn't been ambushed into attending. She'd been handed an opportunity, and she'd weaponized it. Blake gave her the stage. Tessa brought the script. And between the two of them, they'd turned a celebration into a crime scene. That call from Jordan changed something in me. Not the facts. I already knew Tessa was capable of cruelty. But hearing it confirmed by someone outside my own head, someone with no reason to lie, released something I'd been holding on to without realizing it. Doubt. The tiny, persistent whisper that said maybe I was making too much of it. Maybe Blake really was trying to help. Maybe Tessa really did just get caught up in the moment. Jordan's call killed that whisper. It wasn't a moment. It was a plan. It wasn't spontaneous. It was rehearsed. And the man who handed her the microphone was my own brother. I saw Blake one more time before I stopped seeing him entirely. It was at Lynette's house, about 4 months after the dinner. She'd invited both of us for Sunday lunch, separately, she said. But it would be nice if you were both there. I went because Lynette asked, and Lynette had earned that. Blake was already there when I arrived. He looked different, thinner, tired. He had the energy of someone who'd been arguing with the world and losing. We sat at the same table. We ate Lynette's pot roast. We didn't speak to each other directly. At one point, Blake said to Lynette, loud enough for me to hear, "I just wish Cole would stop punishing me for trying to do the right thing." I put my fork down. I looked at him. "The right thing," I said, "would have been letting me have one night." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. I finished my meal. I thanked Lynette. I left, and I haven't been in the same room as Blake since. Darren and I exist in a kind of cold truce now. He calls on holidays. I answer sometimes. We talk about the weather, about sports, about nothing. He has never apologized. He has never acknowledged what happened at that dinner. He has never once said the words, "I'm sorry that happened to you." And I've stopped waiting for him to. Some people don't have the vocabulary for accountability. They weren't built for it. And spending your life waiting for someone to speak a language they don't know is just another way of keeping yourself stuck. The graduation photo, the one from the ceremony, not the dinner, sits on my desk now. Just me, cap and gown, holding the diploma. No one else in the frame. Mason took it on his phone right after I walked off the stage. I'm smiling in it. A real smile. The kind that comes from 4 years of work and 3 applications and a 4 a.m. essay on a kitchen floor. That photo is the only version of that day I keep. The dinner doesn't exist in my memory anymore. I've let it go. Not forgiven it. That's different. Forgiveness requires an apology, and the only people in my family who've given me a real one are my mother and my sister. But I've released it. I've stopped carrying it around like a rock in my chest. Some days it's heavier than others. Some nights I still hear Tessa's voice reading those words in that calm, rehearsed tone, and my chest tightens. But the tightness passes faster now. The echo fades quicker. The version of me that sat frozen in that chair gets a little smaller each day, and the version that walked out gets a little taller. I have a job now. A real one. I design bridges. Actual bridges. Structures that hold weight and span distances and connect things that couldn't reach each other before. Last month, I stood on a site in the early morning fog and watched a crane lower a steel beam into place. A beam I had calculated, measured, and approved. It weighed 12 tons. It fit perfectly, and I stood there in my hard hat with coffee in my hand and thought, I built that. Not my family name. Not my brother's drama. Not my father's approval. Me. There's a metaphor in there somewhere, but I'm not going to force it. Last week, Avery texted me a photo. Her and Caleb at a restaurant. She was holding up a glass of wine. The caption said, "To the Bennett kids who made it out. Love you, little brother." I saved it. I keep it next to the graduation photo. Sometimes I look at those 2 images side by side, the diploma photo and Avery's toast, and I think about what family actually means. Not the word, the action. Family is Avery showing up with coffee and silence. Family is Mason recording 7 minutes and 43 seconds because he knew I'd need proof someday. Family is Lynette sending a text that says, "I'm sorry," and meaning every letter. Family is Caleb pulling me aside to say he wanted to flip a table. Family is not a last name. It's a choice. Some nights, I still think about those messages Tessa read. The 2 a.m. ones. The desperate ones. The ones that made me sound like someone who couldn't survive without another person. And I used to be ashamed of them. I used to lie awake and feel my face burn at the thought of 14 people hearing my worst moments. But I'm not ashamed anymore. Because those messages were real. They were written by a 24-year-old kid in the middle of the worst heartbreak of his life, and they were honest, and they were human, and the fact that someone used them as a weapon says everything about her and nothing about me. I was not pathetic for missing someone. I was not weak for grieving. I was not broken for admitting, at 2 a.m., that I didn't know how to exist without someone I loved. I was just young, and sad, and brave enough to say it out loud. My brother tried to use that against me. My father told me to thank him for it. My ex stood up in front of everyone I love and read my pain like a performance. And I'm still here. Degree on the wall. Job I earned. Bridges I've designed holding weight across rivers and highways. People who matter within arm's reach. A sister who sees me. A friend who had my back before I even asked. A mother who's learning. A future that doesn't require anyone's permission. And a quiet apartment where nobody reads my worst moments out loud and calls it honesty. I didn't lose my family. I just learned which parts of it were worth keeping. They read my worst moments out loud and expected me to be ashamed. Instead, I graduated. Again,